Cory, how's it going? Good to see you.
Pete, doing great. Great to see you too.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, hey everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this inaugural session of Modern Sales Pros Revenue Excellence Summit. I'm super pumped to have the one and only Cory Bray here today to talk about crafting, refreshing, enforcing repeatable sales playbooks, something that I think a lot of organizations are thinking about these days as they're trying to improve the performance of their sales organization. So Cory, maybe you can kind of give folks a little bit of an introduction on yourself before we get started here, so they know that you're not just someone we found, in a gas station, and have the credibility and the bona fides to kind of pronounce on these topics.
Yeah, I was buying a Gatorade and Pete said, "Hey, do you want to do this show with me?" And I said, "Sure."
I like your polo.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've probably created 200 sales playbooks over the last 10 years. Real big passion of mine. Just a couple. And it's interesting because there's themes and there's nuances and there's edge cases and there's things that folks should do and there's things that folks forget to do. And there is a real common theme around how things degrade over time. So hopefully we can introduce some ideas today that can help folks, A, get everything on the right track, but B, also make sure that you don't end up in a spot where it's that one thing that you did back at the end of 2024 and it all goes to garbage 18 months later.
Nice. Cool. And so for folks who don't know Cory, he and his partner, Hillman Sori, are voluminous sale authors. This is actually my favorite one right here. Yeah. This is my favorite sales management book, mainly because it's written as a narrative, which makes it easy for people to consume, and as a result, more likely to consume it and more likely to act on it, which is important when it comes to management. So something near and dear to my heart over here at Atrium. For folks who don't know me, my name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Atrium makes sales performance management software that helps sales organizations measure, manage, and improve performance by automating a lot of the sales performance management that managers and reps have a tendency to maybe avoid.
Sometimes.
Make sure that it actually happens, and make it easy, but importantly make it actually happen. And I'm also one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros here. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this here so everyone can kind of see your sweet smiling face. I think the thing that I'd like to kind of talk about here first, because we're going to be talking about sales playbooks kind of from soup to nuts, both for organizations that who have maybe like never had a sales playbook before, maybe like kind of earlier on have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reps or what have you. And then we're also going to talk about topics like how to do this for organizations that maybe have a sales playbook right now, or maybe like a partially declared falling out of repair sales playbook for organizations that have like 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 sellers, et cetera. So we're going to cover both of those things here. But I think the first kind of top thing that people oftentimes need to understand is like, okay, cool. Like if I'm going to be creating a sales playbook for my team, what's the first step that I should do there? And I think the right way to kind of think about that is to define what good is. And what good is when it comes to your sales motion. And so usually what that's, the way that you would identify what good is by who is selling well. And if you're an early stage organization, and maybe it's the CEO, like I wrote a book on founder-led sales called Founding Sales. If the founder is the one, or the CEO is the one who's doing a good job of like repeatedly selling, then that's good. That's the good, and we need to then seek to document that, et cetera, et cetera. What about in like larger organizations where you might have multiple sellers executing? How do we identify like what good is there, so then we can move to the next step, which is documenting it, et cetera? Well, what's your kind of take on that, Cory?
Well, the answer is not to go to the report and say who's at the top of the leaderboard. Let's just have everybody do what they do. That's not necessarily the right move. So it's looking at
it might be correlated, but it's not necessarily the case. It sounds
there are
like
pieces of that person that you absolutely want to capture, and and replicate. The way I look at it is you want to start with a blueprint, just like if you're building a house. And what does that blueprint look like? Usually it's got some kind of high level ideas, maybe market. So market could hold things like target market and persona and competition. And then maybe you've got a section called prospecting, maybe you've got a section called sales, and then maybe you have something customer success post sale. And then what are all the different components in there that people do well, that people need to know, that maybe there's a gap between the top performers and everybody else across the team today, because the best salespeople spend almost all their time with companies that are going to buy, people within those companies that are going to buy. They know what questions asked, they know how to manage resistance, they know how to do demos and presentations in a way that drive things forward. Oh, and by the way, they know what sales process is backwards and forwards, stages, exit criteria, and all that type of stuff. So what is in the head, consciously or subconsciously, of the folks that really know what they're doing? Or what have we identified that nobody in the company actually knows or is agreed upon, and we got to debate it a little bit and start getting that thing on paper? Because the biggest thing, and I always say this, you cannot iterate on a blank piece of paper. Once it's written down, people are going to point to it and say, that's wrong. That's not right. There's something else better over here. That's where you want to get to. So get it out of the heads, get it on the paper. And then all of a sudden, and not paper, we'll talk about delivery mechanism. Don't write on paper, please.
What might be so if it's not the person who's at the top of the leaderboard per se, because the top of the leaderboard, one of my favorite business books is Bill Walsh's The Score Takes Care of Itself. And so the whole thing in The Score Takes, so Bill Walsh, coach of the San Francisco 49ers, Stanford Cardinal, et cetera. His whole thing was that like the outputs, the score is the result of a bunch of inputs, right? And so like, the person at the top of the bookings leaderboard is the person with the highest score, but obviously there's a bunch of things that went into that, like getting meetings on, like prospecting, getting meetings on the calendar, opportunity conversion, multi-threading, engaging with the right personas, et cetera, et cetera. So if we're going to decompose that, how would we identify people, and not just that person at the top, people who are engaging in the best components of what we just described, because they probably have the secret sauce for those different kind of pieces of the sales motion, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you look at the outcome and you look at the things the person's doing, you say, okay, what would an average person or what would a new person need to be able to do to get there? And oftentimes the people at the top of the leaderboard, man, they're skipping steps. They're not doing a lot of pre-meeting prep. They might just really know the industry really well. And so they can,
it's in the brain already.
It's in the brain. And so it's this unconscious competence thing that you've got at the top of the leaderboard, and they're not doing great pre-meeting prep. They have a gut feel on how to navigate the organization. It's things like that. The experience can lead them to not have to be as fundamentally sound on a step-by-step basis, because it's second nature. And they're also really good at recovering if they get themselves in a jam. And it's funny because some people just like doing that because it makes life more interesting. You don't want your new hires doing that. You don't want your people that you're promoting internally doing that in the first quarter.
We want to be like, yes, less excitement, please. Less excitement. Got it. So it sounds like the way to do that is like, yeah, exactly. Be boring and repeatable, right? Like this. Yes, exactly. We want fewer Michael Jordans, and we want more systems players in the on the basketball team. So probably means like looking at the people who are like, maybe it's not the person who's the top of the leaderboard, or like they would, we would interview them to extract that, but it's also probably the person who has like the highest win rate, right?
Yeah, highest win rate, and who got there the fastest.
Yeah, highest win rate would be an example. So like maybe they actually are, maybe they're not kind of like skipping steps, et cetera, because like, when they shoot, they hit it. But maybe they're not as high activity as the person who's at the top of the leaderboard. And then maybe another person would be like, all right, cool. Like who's the person who's like really great at pipe gen, getting stuff on the calendar? That might be, and like, so if you take those kind of like three characters right there, Larry, Moe, and Curly, and we go to extract what's going on in their brain and like what they're doing, and kind of like then seek to, as you were saying, kind of put it on paper and then start shooting at it and shooting holes on it. That would probably give us some good parameters around like what the right, like the intersect of their sales motion might be the beginnings of a good like sales playbook.
You just inadvertently made the point that I've been making a lot for the last year, which is it's so much more important for your sales enablement people to have analytical and project management skills to do what Pete just described than to have sales experience. They can have sales experience, that's sure, and I don't want to go off on it in a tangent, but what he just described of, I'm looking at the team and I'm analyzing what are different people doing that's working well, what are folks skipping steps on and they're still getting performance and why, and how do we fill in the gap with everybody else around those areas. Well, if we use our analytical skills and then we do project management to go from this idea of, okay, we're going to identify the gaps, we're going to close the gaps with content, with playbook, et cetera, then your sales enablement person is going to have a huge impact. But if they sit there and like, oh, I sold 12 years ago and tell story time about that, that doesn't help any of this. So that's the piece. The analytical and project management skills make this thing come to life.
Right. So I guess the point there being like, if we're going to identify the right humans who are doing the things, we need to have at least cursory analytical capacity in order to say, hey, this person may not be at the top of the leaderboard, but they have the highest win rate. This person, and like maybe if you want to get double black diamond, we would say, hey, and actually this individual right here, they have the highest win rate from POC as an example. This is something like we work with our customers about quite a bit, because one of the kind of key initiatives that organizations use Atrium to performance manage would be like opportunity conversion. They use other stuff too, like, you know, pipeline hygiene or just like good old activity or what have you. But if you have an organization that's really focused on making sure that they're winning their POCs, that means paying attention to like the win rate from a special stage. So that would kind of be like a double black diamond thing to identify there. And then later on, to your point, even though this isn't exactly what we're talking about as relates to the playbook, a good skill of an enablement of an enabler would be identifying the hitch in the sales motion where somebody is not aligning to the sales playbook. Like, hey, this person's win rate's great, but boy, howdy, do they suck at prospecting and self-prospecting. Boy, yuck, right? And so the only way that you're going to do that is by identifying the gap that Cory was just delineating. And of course, what's the gap from? The gap is from the person who is the best at self-prospecting or the best at win rate. Okay, cool. So we just talked about like how we extract the best, right? And so then the next thing would be like, okay, cool. Well, like we're going to go ahead and extract the best from like the top of the person at the top of the leaderboard, the person with the best win rate, the person with the best the best conversion rate through the pipe, and maybe the person who's like highest maybe the person who's the activity king or queen, and then the person who's the best at pipe gen. Okay, cool. So now we've got like Larry, Moe, and Curly, and I don't know what was the fourth stooge? I can't even remember. Shep. And so now what we need to do is extract that and get it documented. So I think one of the challenges that organizations have a tendency to do is they say, hey, we're going to do this like giant sales playbook thing. And they go into this like deep build thing, right? Like, oh, we're going to redo everything, et cetera, et cetera. And then they end up with like, you know, they run out of gas and they end up with like 10% or 25% of like a very well documented 25% of a sales playbook. But as a software entrepreneur, I'm a big fan of like minimum viable products and things where something's always delivering utility, right? So like the classic metaphor here is like you want to design a product like a skateboard and then a scooter and then a bike and then a motorcycle and then a car. And so like as you're adding kind of, you know, characteristics and features at every single point in time there, the thing could roll and like take you to the park or take you to Whole Foods or whatever, right? And so I wonder in this situation when we're trying to like create a sales playbook that then can deliver utility very quickly and we can flesh out what would be kind of mechanisms to do that. Like I'll give an example. One of the things that I'm a big fan of, and you know, I work with a lot of early stage founders on these things. A lot of like a very common defect that you'll see in early stage founders who are doing founder-led selling is they're just like, oh, I'm just going to demo, right? Like they don't have like any sales like deck or slides or what have you for like visual framing whatsoever. Put aside like discovery questions or like, you know, demo script or pitch script or whatever. And so one of the things that can be a very helpful guardrails, right? Like swim lane can literally just be like a sales deck that you can like 10 slides where like all you have to do is like hit next, right? And like, you know, that now at least we have guardrails around a person. Now it might not be the best thing in the world, et cetera, but at least it's like better than just like that's a good example of something that's like very minimally viable. I wonder what are some of the other ways that you can take this extracted expertise, right, and then declare it in a way that leads to repeatability and kind of like enforcing repeatability on a sales organization, short of like a Mona Lisa, right, Trevi Fountain style sales playbook.
Well, the most impactful and the fastest one is your pain points that you solve for. So what pain points do you solve for specific personas? And then what features are used to solve those pain points? So when you're going to go in and meet with the chief marketing officer, here's the top 6 pain points that we solve for a chief marketing officer. Cool. So we ask questions that suss those out. And then by the time we get to the demo, cool, here's the features that solve those pain points. And so now we've got something that's directed, relevant, focused on pain that's going to create velocity for us. So that's the first place I'd start.
So like the first thing you'd start with is minimally, it's like product marketing 101, right? Where it's like personas, their pain points, and then the features that match to them, right? So for folks who have maybe done like force management or what have you, I think it's like value drivers and like required capabilities and so on and so. But the point is like, who is the human that cares about this thing? What are the specific sub things that they care about, and how does our stuff fix those things? And that, like, so use Atrium as an example. For us, that might be like, chief revenue officer has a need for their managers to manage more effectively, right? They have a secondary need for their reps to self-manage themselves, and then there's capabilities within that in Atrium's product to help do that. Sales operations is a separate persona that we work with, and they have related but different ones. Like they have a need to provide managers with analytical capabilities that allow them to performance manage, and they have pain points around that, blah 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 blah. So like making sure that that's declared first and foremost. What format do you like that declared in?
Well, the framework I use for it, which I love because I can do this whole 3-week exercise in 2 hours. You go, imagine columns. So I'm going to do this verbally so everybody can follow along, pause it and rewind if you want to. So first column's feature, second column's benefit. So we list out the benefits for that feature. And third column is pain points. So what pain would someone have to care about that benefit? And it can't be inefficiency. It can't be cost, because everything's inefficient. Everything costs money. So what's the pain point someone would have to care about that benefit? And once you get the pain point, what personas is it relevant to? Which market segments, if you have multiple market segments, is it relevant to? And then 2 more things I do is I score them and I say, what's the impact of solving this pain point on a scale of 0 to 4? 0 is no impact, 4 is massive impact. And then winning zone, how well are we positioned to win against the competition? 0, everyone does it. 4, we're the only people that can solve for this pain point, at least in an order of magnitude of investment, whatever. So now all of a sudden we can throw that benefits column away. So we got pain points tied to features, linked to personas and market segments, and we understand the order of magnitude at which we impact folks and that we win. And if you do this exercise, it's hard. Knock it out in a couple hours for a reasonably sized company. And then all of a sudden your salespeople know exactly when they go to the meeting with this person, this market segment, here are the things I'm looking for. And then when they say they've got him, here's what I demo. Boom, done.
Right. Exactly. And then moreover, it goes upstream, where ideally what we can do is we can proactively identify organizations or humans who have these pain points and engage them such that we're not showing up to meetings and like we want the frogs that we kiss to be more likely to turn into princes versus right just kind of running around, right? So we want to elicit these folks from the market. Okay, wonderful. So it sounds like that's like the minimum would essentially be a framework like that around features that solve pain points that tie to humans, personas that we care about, and how big of a pain in the ass that is for them. Like, is it cute or is it gnarly, right? And I think, and then because then everything's going to cascade from there. Like our discovery questions, we probably want to elicit more gnarly, right? We want to talk about gnarly with like the things that are gnarly for the people who that we're talking with. It cascades to marketing. We want to identify and extract the appropriate personas that have very gnarly pain points that we solve for. Wonderful. What's the big kid documentation version of this? Because we talked about like minimum viable,
Yeah.
but what's the gold standard, the big kid version of
Well,
this?
the gold standard big head is one thing. It's a pre-meeting prep that has tentacles that go down into lots of different things. Pre-meeting prep might be, okay, what market segment are we talking to? Do we win in that market segment, or is that more of a frontier market for us? Who is the persona or personas that I'm talking to in this meeting? Who am I competing against I know about or that I might suspect? What discovery questions am I going to ask? What objections have we already gotten or do we anticipate getting? What content or resources am I going to use to support this deal? Those are the types of things that we can start looking at, and you can form it off of that broad strokes, or you can even go deeper and say, okay, who on my team is joining this and how are we going to orchestrate the conversation versus the product demo versus some kind of trial or POC setup. And so anything in the pre-meeting prep goes down, and maybe you've got somebody that's been selling the same product for 6 years and they just do this in their head.
Yeah,
Take
totally.
that out and get the person that just started or just got promoted and get them doing that in a more structured and formatted way that managers can coach to. Great use of manager time to coach on pre-meeting prep.
Oh yeah, totally. I used to. It's funny. So my mom is a former teacher and professor of education. So I'm a big worksheet guys, and so literally at my last software company, we had pre-call planning worksheets that were printed out and like just stacked on people's desks that were specific to the sales motion. Talent Bin was the name of the software company's recruiting software company, and like literally they would fill it out. And they'd like fill it out like partially and kind of like half-assed or whatever. And it's like scribbled and ugly and so on and so forth. But the point was is that what it did is it made them run through the process, right, and start grooving their brain. Even if like it was like chicken scratch, at least they were kind of like grooving it. And so and also it created like an inspectable artifact.
Yeah.
Right. So you're like, yeah, once you like, can you show me that pre-call worksheet there, right?
Right.
And then
And then
also you can allow for pair programming, like, hey, let's go ahead and sit together and like let's reason this through. Now that's doing live fire, which is good. What about like installation of this in a more intentional fashion? Right. And like maybe what we can do is we can talk about how this gets installed with newly onboarded staff, and
yeah.
then how maybe how it gets like reinstalled with staff who have like maybe been around the block a couple times and maybe need kind of parts of their sales motion zhuzhed up a little bit. Let's start with the first one around like folks that are newly onboarded and need this installed, kind of like Neo in the Matrix, right? Like they need
Yeah.
to know Kung Fu and like have it downloaded. How do we download it for them
Well,
effectively?
now I'm aging myself. Johnny Mnemonic, you just stick it behind his ear.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
the best thing that you can do is you can take this playbook and you can say, look, it's not a full onboarding program, but it certainly should be used as part of the onboarding program. So as you're doing your learning path or whatever you've got for your new hires and they learn about the market, well, let's use the target market element of the playbook as the main asset, and we can give it context and we can talk about what is a target market, why is it important for junior folks, or for more senior folks you can say, hey, here's our target market, here's how it differentiates from a couple different competitors, et cetera. Use it as you ramp folks up, and so they get used to using it. It's one of the things I always like to say is that minor league baseball players play baseball. They don't shag fly balls and do laundry. They're doing the work that they'd be doing when they get moved up. So even as somebody's onboarding and ramping, get them using the sales playbook. Don't have them do this other thing and all of a sudden be like, oh, you're done with onboarding. Now this is what you're going to use. Get it ingrained in them early, and so they can really use it as a tool to lean on. And the more senior folks might use less of it because they don't need the super elementary stuff if they've been in the industry for a long time. But they certainly want to know what's new with competition, what's new with products, what are my good discovery questions I'm going to ask, and what objections are folks running into.
Yeah. And I think this is like onboarding. Sometimes people can go into a really deep like build loop, right?
Yeah.
And so usually, and I actually made this error with an onboarding class I did about 36 months ago, I want to say, where I like certed everybody on each step, right? Versus cert, get him in the mix,
Yeah.
cert, get him in the mix. So like pre-call and disco cert, start taking disco calls, right? Pitch and demo cert, start doing that. And the reason why is because like you can lose like a week or two there, Whereas like if somebody disco certs, like pre-call and disco certs, you can start having them do disco calls immediately, depending on your sales motion, obviously. But like you can have them start doing disco calls immediately, and then setting next, not just mock discos like with you or with like, you know, nowadays with like an AI trainer, et cetera, but like that's fine, right? But also live fire as well, like having them do actual disco calls, because then they're gonna, you know, probably the second meeting will get set the next week, maybe. Well, now you've got the time for them, the time and also the motivation for for them to pitch and demo cert more meaningfully versus disco certing and then pitch certing and then, you know, objection certing, et cetera, and then only then getting into the game and actually being able to do at bats, right? Like that. That's an ineffective way of doing that. What for folks who are not being newly onboarded but are also already like in the mix, right? How do we, like, let's presume that we're in the scenario where we said, hey man, like we're gonna do like a refresh of our sales playbook or an actual declaration of our sales playbook. We went in, we did this thing, we grabbed Larry, Moe, and Curly and Shep, who have like, you know, the best bookings, the best win rate, the best pipe gen, and the best activity. And then we extracted information, then we like minimally documented that. And now we're doing this from an onboarding standpoint. But what about our existing field? Like, what about the 20 sellers that we have in the field right now who have kind of like maybe come up in this, you know, artisanal, maybe like less intentional sales playbook? How do we get them like snapped into line on the new?
We've got to uncover their pain. We got to diagnose what their challenges are when it comes to working their deals. So are deals stalling at stage 3? There we go. 5 secrets of a sales coach. And it's fun because we wrote all those before AI. So I actually had to hire a writing coach to learn how to write fiction.
But anyway, extracting, the reason I'm joking with Cory right now is because one of the big insights in this book is that as a manager, it's just like discovery-based selling there. Like, okay, what's their pain point? What's the thing that's going to make them have a willingness, like why them, why now, why are they going to be willing to change versus like, because I'm the boss and you're supposed to listen to me. Right. So carry on. So we got to extract their pain, right?
Yeah, because if we go to somebody that's been at the company for 3 years, if you showed somebody a sales playbook that's been there for 3 months, you know what they always say? They say often, almost always, this would have been helpful when I started. And it's this illusion of mastery of either thinking they should already know this stuff or seeing some words and phrases and feeling familiarity, therefore inferring mastery, which is wild. But humans do it. Humans love doing it, especially people that have the personality types that go into sales. What we need to do is look at, are their deals stalling at a certain stage? Is their deal size too low because they're over discounting? Is their win rate too low relative to their peers or what we expect from them? Figure out what the actual problem is using Atrium. And then we come back and we say, well, what behaviors do we want to modify? Is that a mindset challenge? Is it a skill set challenge? Is it an activity challenge? And then how do we coach them from where they're at to where they need to be? Which probably goes back to things like pre-meeting prep. It could be time management. It could be their understanding of the sales methodology or some other type of mindset challenge that they've got. And coaching's personal. So you can't take that person that's been there for 3 years and say, I'm going to put you in a room with 10 people and talk to you. And by the way, here's a document to go use. That's not going to work. So it's a tool to identify the coaching challenges and then have that live coaching conversation where they self-realize that they've got a problem. And then you work together to get a solution in place that they're held accountable to.
Yep. So find their pain point and bring them along, right? And I think cadences can be really helpful for this. This is why, like, I'm a big operating rhythm guy. Like, we do it from like a bottoms up standpoint with like performance management. Like, organization managers and their reps should be having weekly or at least bi-weekly, every other week, what we call performance check-ins, looking at their KPIs, different from like a one-on-one or like a pipeline review or what have you, just a performance check-in, right? To make sure that we're tracking towards our goals. So like, and that happens every other week. We have monthly look backs. We probably have like weekly team meetings. We have quarterly business reviews. Oh, we have an SKO, right? And so like SKO can be a very effective place for this to be done. And then maybe in between SKOs, what you can do is you can declare, like create maybe something on a quarterly basis, because SKO is like annual. Maybe you can do something that's quarterly, that's different than a QBR, because QBRs are usually like booking centric, right? Pipe centric, booking centric, et cetera, et cetera. Something that is intermediary between annual SKO cycles in order to look at these things and kind of like use it as an opportunity for installing that kind of zhuzhed up sales playbook.
Yeah, totally. And here's if you're going to do it with a QBR, here's an exercise I'll tune everybody into, which I just love. Hour and a half, 2 hour session. We did case studies in college. You got Harvard Business Review, 6-page, 8-page, 12-page case study of here was the solution, here were a bunch of facts, and then here's a bunch of questions to answer. We'll create that for your team. Go look at a deal that we lost. Go look at a deal that we won. Create the scenario. Hey, we're selling to Alpha Corp, and Bob and Jane were the buyers, and their personas were this and that and the other. Here's the pain that we uncovered. Boom. What would you be worried about if you were a seller? Seller goes and has this conversation, asks these 3 questions to Jane. What question would you have asked? Jane has this objection. Boom. What would you do if you were the salesperson in this case? And so you write these out, and they're super fun to write. Page and a half, 2 pages. You can do 3 of them in an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so you're taking these deals or these challenges that exist within your business, and then you're applying the lessons learned from the sales methodology and from the sales playbook into this exercise, and you get people to collaborate. You get them to do it in teams. And it's such a phenomenal exercise as an advanced exercise that even experienced folks are going to say, wow, I got something out of that. So I strongly recommend that over having, some keynote speaker that says the F word a lot, trying to pump people up during your QBR. That's just not helpful.
Yeah. Like actually use it as an opportunity to do actual push-ups.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So we've talked about how to like identify good, document the good, right? So Larry Moe and Curly and Shep extract the good, document the good in our various ways that it's easily accessible. Install the good, right? Install the good with newbies. Reinstall, slide in, incept the good into our existing folks, right? Okay. Well, now how do we inspect the good and make sure that it's actually sticking and actually happening? Because when I won't share my screen here because ain't nobody need another slide in their life right now. But one of the things that I talk about, I put together this. I'm a recovering product marketer, so my staff likes to joke that I just like emit slides from my fingers, just like it's like Harry Potter. But when it comes to enablement programs, there's like, hey, what are we going to enable on? Like, what's the initiative in question? Whether it's a sales playbook or maybe like our company bought a new product, acquired a new company,
which should still be sales playbook
or whatever. Yeah, totally. Like it's a subcomponent of the sales playbook, right? And then it would require a refresh of the sales playbook. Anyway, whatever the initiative is, there's different kind of components. There's an operations component of it, which is like, let's use the new product example. Like, what are the suspect organizations that we want to cross-sell this new product that we just acquired into? Well, sales operations has got to go and do a whole like TAM analysis and like update that. And like, we got to create a new field and make sure that it's tagged and make the relevant reporting so the sellers can identify those. Okay, cool. What about the content? Well, enablement's got to go ahead and produce learning materials, kill sheets, documents, like new slides, right? And then also content, like email content and talk tracks for engaging and then talking to this. Okay, so like we've got an operations piece. Okay, how do we know that actually happened? Right? And like that's oftentimes people are just like, my favorite joke about this is like, it's like in The Princess Bride, where it's like, have fun storming the castle, have fun, kids, right? Where it's like, okay, cool. Like, are they actually are they doing the thing? Are they doing it appropriately? Are they getting annihilated while trying to do it? Or are they actually having success? And like, and obviously that's going to be different on a per person basis. And that's like an instrumentation thing. And of course, like, this is why we position what we do to organizations in that regard, especially as regards to enablement. A lot of the times it's just like, cool, so how did you know that they did it? And they're like, they certed on it, so of course they'll do it, right? And so I think that this inspection, like, you should always have a component of like, how will we know that this is being done, right? And like, what are the mechanisms by which we do that? And of course, like that's inspection, right? So how can we inspect that these things are happening appropriately? Cory, maybe you can kind of like, I can speak to metrical inspection. Maybe you can speak to other kind of like qualitative inspection, et cetera, deal centric inspection, et cetera.
Yeah, two things. One, I would say the second line managers need to be held accountable to holding the first line managers accountable. And this is where coaching breaks down. If coaching is just this thing that's supposed to happen,
very meta.
Yeah, it is.
Accountability all the way down.
It's got to be there, because if nobody's holding the frontline managers accountable to coaching, then this stuff really doesn't work. And here's how that looks. Second line manager, VP, CEO, whoever it is, goes up and says, "Hey, frontline manager, let's walk through your team. So what are you coaching them on right now? You know, it's a little Timmy. What are you coaching little Timmy on right now? I'm coaching him on whatever. Cool. What else did you
pipe gen? Little Timmy, he's got a pipe gen problem. He's got a gap. He's got a gap in his pipe gen.
Gap in his pipe gen. Cool. What else did you consider that led you to choose pipe gen as the most important thing to coach little Timmy on?" So that's the idea of not just give me an update. Oh, cool, thanks. Now let's actually inspect it and see if they're using analytical skills. It's funny. Everything Pete just talked about for the last 3 minutes was project management. We're back to analytical skills. These are the two most important things in enablement, whether you're in enablement or a manager, whatever it is. Are we inspecting if the frontline managers actually understand what the most important thing to coach their reps on are? That's one thing. And then from the playbook perspective, does each element of the playbook have an owner and an inspection cadence? Every 90 days, Joe Bob's going to go inspect these 5 elements, and then somebody else is going to go inspect these 3 elements, and we're going to hold them accountable. So I think that senior management having to hold frontline management accountable to stuff is often a gap, especially in fast-growing companies. That's my take.
Yeah, totally. This is actually something that Atrium 3 or 4 years ago, we worked with like 10-person, 20-person sales organizations. Now we work with like 100-person, 200-person, 500-person sales organizations. And usually what it kind of comes down, the thing that we hear on a recurring basis from CROs and SVPs and VPs of sales operations is like, yeah, but can you show me how my managers are using Atrium to like actually project, manage, like performance management force into their teams? And of course, like this is one of the reasons why we built a lot of like rep facing functionality from our AI sales coach. So like there can be like direct coaching happening there. But you still need the manager doing the behavior, so the people just don't like shrug it off. And so leaders kind of keep coming back to it, like, hey, can you tell me that this manager is actually managing versus just jumping on calls. Now, jumping on calls is great, right? Like, but like it's not sufficient, right? Like, especially if you're jumping on calls and then leading the call. No. Very, very low leverage, right? And understand, have empathy about like stuff that's getting close to the line, et cetera, but recognize that it's a low leverage way of going about managing, and you're not building capabilities in your reps, right? But so our managers, managing, holding accountable, and then coaching. Okay, well, like show me the inspectable artifacts associated with that, and that is very frequently a gap. The last thing I want to touch on before we wrap here is just, and you kind of hinted at it a little bit, is how do we make sure that this playbook doesn't drift from reality, right? How do we make sure that it's continually getting updated? And I think the challenge there, of course, can be like there's so many different things to do, and making sure that people like this always feels like something that's going to be like last on the list. What are mechanisms by which this can be like rolled into an operating rhythm such that we can be ensured that it happens, right?
It's got to be on the executive scorecard. Whatever the senior executive team uses to manage their self-accountability to each other, it's got to be one of those things. And it's binary. Did we review it and sign off on it, or did we not? And the reason why people think this is hard is because they struggle to get the right people in the room with the right framework. It is, I know a lot of these. If you get the right people in the room with the right framework, it is really not that hard to do anything in sales enablement. If you have the wrong people in the room and the wrong framework, disaster.
Yeah. And I think that because usually what ends up happening is it's like, oh, well, like I'll go and talk with so and so. Right. And then that goes and becomes like this loop and like, oh, well, and then we'll come back versus, hey, we're all going to share brains concurrently and then
Right.
actually knock this out.
Because and someone with the manager title actually needs the CEO to answer 3 questions, and they feel like they've got to go through the chain of command through the lieutenant colonel, and all of a sudden it gets diluted down to the point where we're invading the ocean.
Well, and also it takes 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to the content ownership piece that you were talking about there, about somebody being accountable for like an actual document? Because like let's imagine that we have like when I've done sales playbooks, it can be like a 20-page Google Doc with a bunch like with a bunch of slides and like hyperlinks off to like decks, and other assets, discovery questions, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like this 20-page document, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's a 10-page document or what have you. But like there's lots of different parts within that. So
Yep.
doing a full refresh on like a 20-page document or a full audit on it might be a little bit of a lift, especially if you don't have someone who has the totality of the sales motion in their brain. Now, easier if somebody does have the totality of the sales motion in their brain. But what would be the mechanism by which you like kind of part that up, like you were saying, such that someone's like, yeah, I inspected this, I consumed it, it's still good, right? Or I
Yeah.
updated it and judged it up.
I think you need to have an owner for each element, and that might be product marketing for target market personas and things like that, content. And then it might be sales development leader for prospecting stuff, and it might be sales leader for sales process, things like that. And then they look at it. And yeah, if you use a doc, it's really hard to do it. It used to be the way to do it. But man, I've seen in the last month, I've seen 175 page playbooks that nobody was using because they were so long and unwieldy. So
Yeah.
there's ways to do this. If you want to reach out to me, I got some ideas for you. The frequent accountability around this is, again, I think it's holding the managers accountable. And one reason that doesn't happen a lot that I've found just through lots of experiences is that folks that can get promoted from SDR to sales leader, et cetera, where do they develop project management skills?
Yeah, systems thinking.
It's
Right.
just not. It's not a frequent thing that you just stumble upon. So if you didn't study engineering in college and you didn't get an opportunity to have a really great mentor that forced you to develop analytical and project management skills, you're going to be behind. And the good news is there's tons of resources out there, and if you put some effort in, you're reasonably smart. You can get pretty fast.
What is? It's funny. I was looking around for my so my favorite process engineering book, of course, is The Goal, and I have a copy of The Goal graphic novel running around here somewhere in the office, which is fantastic. I wonder if there's like a good yeah, I guess like The Goal is a good way to kind of, it's not project management per se, but it's essentially like process engineering, which has a component of project management. I guess like the Phoenix project is kind of the IT version of this as well. I wonder if there's other resources as well to kind of help people with the notion of like the herding of the cats and the critical path and all those sort of things, because those are the things that you're talking about right now. I don't know, maybe we just have like everybody play Factorio or something, and like and or Lemmings. That's a real deep cut for folks. Any sort of resources to kind of help folks understand a little bit more of like the process alignment, kind of project management stuff? Do you guys like, you're like, well, yes, we have our own book on that. Is there a Cory Bray Hillman Sorry joint that covers that sort of stuff? No,
I've got unconscious confidence over that. I don't know. There's lots of stuff out there though. Just get it and you'll get it fast.
Ask GPT-4. Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, Cory, this is super fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about the structuring, the extraction, the declaration, the installation, the inspection of these sales playbooks. I think that the key takeaway here is that it's about a process. It's about systematization and repeatability, and people should always be thinking about if like that's the goal, is like the ability for people to be able to like run these plays again and again and again and again with as little kind of like bespoke understanding as possible, but just like paint by numbers, et cetera. So while thinking about these, how do you make it such that a prototypical rep can paint by numbers and behave like the top performer of any of those four components that we talked about, like, you know, pure bookings, win rate, pipeline generation, pipeline conversion, and kind of pure activity. So if folks are like, I know that you guys do this stuff professionally as well, Cory, if folks are interested in kind of like talking with you live regarding like sales playbook refresh or installation or like, you know, creation, instantiation, et cetera, I assume they should just find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's easy. Just
okay.
Don't include that you've got offshore development services. I might auto delete that one, but anything else is cool.
Yeah, in your right, in your AI your AI LinkedIn connection.
You get
Wonderful. Yeah, totally. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Cory. I really appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day. Okay, and then for everybody else, I don't remember exactly what the next session here is today for the Sales Excellence Summit, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. And you know, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Okay.
Thanks, Pete.
Bye.